We are all eager to listen to you, sir. Thank you, Mr. John, and all the Rotarians present here. The only picture we're missing here is that in a uniform as a captain. So I think that would have been very delightful if you could have seen me in my uniform, because I'm the only parliamentarian on globe who's actually flying a big airlines. So, but nonetheless, I've been given a completely new assignment. And this assignment, because we have to talk something about literacy, we have to talk something about what we are doing back in the government in Delhi. So I think it's an opportune moment to tell you that I have been endowed with a responsibility which possibly was not my forte. And the Prime Minister decided to give me an aspect of administration which possibly we have lagged behind a lot. And that's the Department of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, along with Parliamentary Affairs. Now, when I take this name, what actually I'm supposed to look after in this country? And that could be possibly of great interest, because most of us have been hearing about it, but what does it actually mean is something which has not dawned upon us. Well, we have been talking about skill development. When we talk about skill development in this country, we talk about those 500 million people in this country who are in the unorganized sector. When we say unorganized sector, actually those who may not be a part of us, but all those who have to deal with you almost in every aspect of life. Even if I have to keep away the numbers which is in the farm sector, which is about 54%, we have plans for it differently, but if I have to keep it as of now away from the skill development aspect, I have another left is about 250 million people which we have to train. Now, why do I put these figures is basically that all of us must know that we have a lot of things lined up when we are talking about Make in India, we are talking about taking the GDP growth to about 8%. This does not fit in unless and until the ingredients fit in. And when I'm talking about these numbers, I would like to just flag some figures which possibly will come as a shocker to you. When we talk about skills across the world, in China, which has a population of around 1.4 billion people, 45% of the workforce is skilled. When you talk about United States of America, about 55% of the workforce is skilled. When you talk about Australia, 60% of the workforce in Australia is skilled. When you talk about United Kingdom, it's about good 68% of the workforce which is skilled. When you talk about Germany, 74% of the workforce is skilled. When you talk about Korea, 96% of the workforce is skilled. But would you want to know what is there in India? Could you widely guess? 35, 25, 15, 10. Well, it's just 2%, and that's the figure which all of you must. And that's possibly why the Prime Minister thought that this was an area which need to be addressed, because prosperity will not come to us unless and until we are in a position to address this issue. And when I say 2%, that actually is the figure what we have done. We have spent about 55 years ago. 55 years we have spent educating people. But actually, has it meant something to us when we are talking about graduates, postgraduates, and people passing out from the universities? But when we talk about these numbers, we also have to think, because most of these countries had a legislation, and Germany had a legislation on skill development in 1874 or so, good about 150 years ago. Most of the other countries would have had a legislation in the 19th century. I'm not talking about a legislation today. But we'll have to remember one aspect, that this country doesn't move if we do not. And thanks to the Prime Minister, that this particular aspect of administration which was there started in 2009, when we had a target of training 500 million people, was just under the Ministry of Finance. And subsequently, with the Planning Commission, and further down, we actually were clueless as what we are doing. We had numbers. We talked about 500 million people to be trained. But how we go about it was actually not decided. It was only when the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, took over the government, he created a new department. And the Department of Entrepreneurship was attached to the Ministry of Sports. But he thought it was not good enough. And actually, this work, which should have started in this country 60 years ago, actually started 90 days ago when I was inducted as a Union Minister for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So this is actually a 90-day-old affair, what I'm talking about. But possibly it's the biggest challenge which this country has ever faced. And we have not discussed about it. If I have to explain to you how it's very difficult to understand. I had a minister visiting from South Australia. It's a province in Australia with a population of 1.2 million. And with a population of about 1.2 million, I represent a constituency which is 1.5 million, and that was a state in Australia. And they had, in their own system of education, identified for a population of 1.2 million, 1,300 job roles. Well, I don't want to get into the technical aspects of a qualification pack and job roles and things like that. And we in India, at least now with the NSDC in place, just have about 960 job roles. So there's a complete disconnect of what we were actually talking for years. But if we have to do it, how do we do it? We need the resources, because what is not there, in the last Parliament session, Government of India has been doing some skilling in various ministries. And if I recall, when I became a minister, and in the last session of Parliament, there were about good 20-odd ministers answering questions on skill development in Parliament, except the Minister for Skill Development. Because it was spread in 24 departments, 70 schemes, and everyone trying to train people as they thought it was correct. So now at least we have a department, we have a ministry where we are talking. So what are the challenges there? And challenges are very simple, which we need to explain that it has to be standardized. Because if you need a plumber, the plumber has to be rated. So anyone who has to be certified as a plumber or a operator or a lift operator, someone has to come forward and create a syllabus for it. I'm not talking about the QPs. I'm putting a simple word as a syllabus for it or a job role for it. And if there is a job role, then someone has to train them and someone has to create a system of training. If they are to be trained, we need trainers who are certified to train them. And once we have trainers who are certified to train them, we train them and we require inputs for training. And once we train them, we need a system of assessing whether they are good enough trained or not. And once we have a system of assessment, then we must have a system of certification. And then that certificate should be good enough to employ him. And that is the chain, what is the government talking about. Fortunately, we have created, and I think most of you would be from the industry, that we have created a system of sector skill cost councils, which possibly for the first time in Indian history, we have created a body under the National Skill Development Corporation, which talks about that the individual who has to be trained has to be under certification, or the syllabus which is to be created or the packs which have to be created for his training has to be vetted by the industry. So industry decides what the industry would like to employ. And this mechanism has been institutionalized, and that actually what is emerged as sector skill councils. And Vidya is from the Symbiosis sitting here. They are working in the sector skill council for health. We have a sector skill council for automotive. And if you have to map this requirement, in the infrastructure we require about 10 crore people by 2022. In automotive sector we require about 3.3, I've just left the figures. So in retail we require about 1.26 crore people. So we have large number if we talk about the economy growing at 8%, we require all these people by 2022. So to train this 25 crore people or 30 crore people, and if we assess that we require 20,000 rupees per head, we require another 5 lakh crores in the next 5 years. So where does this money come from? And these are the challenges which we are facing. And when we talk about these things, I can just tell you a small example. I don't know if there is anyone from Peru or if you heard about that country called Peru. It's in South America. Anyone can widely guess how far is Peru from India? 24 hours, 20,000 miles. Well, it's about 17,000 kilometers. And the embassy in Peru wrote to us that they are issuing visas every month or maybe quarterly for forklift operators, for long-hole drill operators, for JCBs. So just imagine people are coming from 15,000 kilometers away, where there are about only 250 Indians living in that country. They are coming 15,000 kilometers away to be employed as jumbo operators or forklift operators. So this is the challenge what we are talking about, and this has actually happened this way. I can keep on rattling out many more figures, but I just wanted to sensitize all of us that India has lagged behind as a vision of the Prime Minister. Now there are challenges. How do we go about it? There are some ideas which we are exploring. And when we talk about these ideas, what we are saying, and when we talk about, now if you have to train 250 million people or 300 million people or 350 million people, because it's believed that by 2020, India would have about 356 million youngsters, followed by China, which would be around 250 million people, and then subsequently Pakistan would have another 59 million people, and so forth and so on. So if we have to train them, we have to have out-of-box ideas, and this is what the Prime Minister feels, that we have to go 24/7, use the national infrastructure, whether it's in the private sector or in the government sector, and use all institutions to give back to the society and say that look, we have to do it. And how do we do it? And when we talk about this whole institution, we need to have trainers. And where do we get these trainers about? That's the biggest problem. You can get teachers because you are getting MAs and BAs, and you can have a B.Ed program and you can have teachers. But where do you get people for skilled trainers, which actually skills are? Day before yesterday, I was in Ahmedabad, and there was actually a blind school in which the boys were doing the total work of plumbing, fitting showers, fitting wash basins, cutting pipes, measuring those pipes, and they were all blind. So there is a possibility, there is a way, but we are unaware, and we are not actually groomed ourselves to take care of these situations. So when we talk about trainers, I talked to the Prime Minister and said, let's get going, sir, we have to get out-of-box ideas. And one of the largest Indian armed forces is one of the largest armed forces in the world. And we are third in the world, and we employ about 1.5 million people in the armed forces, which is the third largest after China, America. India is the largest. And about 50,000 people retire, and 50,000 people retire at the age of 36 to 38 because the JCOs, after 20 years of JCOs and below, retire at the age of 20, giving 20 years of service. So we decided that instead of putting all these boys as security guards, why don't we create a disciplined workforce which can be skilled? The idea was to get them in the last year of training as trainers, get them trained in the armed forces itself and bring them out so they can come back as trainers, or B, they can come back as entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs would give more employment additionally. So that was the idea. When we talk about the railways is one of the largest public sector organizations in the world. The Indian Railways is the largest carrier of passenger and freight, and it's almost the largest network. We have 64,000 kilometers of railway network, started right from the Britishers. So we have 8,000 stations in this country, and there are about 6,000 stations in this country which actually have even one or two trains stopping. And they are categorized as halts, station A, B, C, and D. There are revenue stations, there are non-revenue stations. But all these railway stations across the country reach those places which possibly you and I cannot reach in a car also. They are the arterial connection to the hinterland of India. And when we talk to the Prime Minister, he told it to the Railway Minister, and today we are planning that Indian Railways has three distinctive features which no geographical location in this country has in uniformity. A, it has an infrastructure. That means it has sheds, it has platforms, it has water, it has some sort of toilets, and it has a dedicated electricity which is not there in almost, if you see, across the country. And the second aspect which the Indian Railways, I had just gone to an institute where a couple of colleagues were called GTT, and they are training about good 20,000 students on. So the second facility which is there on all the railway stations, which most of us may not be aware, that we, in the Indian Railways, has 43,000 kilometers of optical fiber network which is existing, and it is used about 5 to 7%. So the railways with the platforms, the railways with the infrastructure of water, electricity, toilets and rooms, and a dedicated electricity with OFC network, can be great institutions for catching the hinterland. And when we have virtual classrooms, and if you have mapped area where, today I was with CREDAI, and CREDAI is an institution which has set up a beautiful center here for training. And if some of you have the time to visit those centers, you must find out that Kaushal, where they train workers who are absolutely illiterates. They come here, they work on site, they get trained, and they came here with the salary per day annual earning of about 40, 50 rupees. They go out earning about 500 rupees a day. So there are institutions, there are processes, there are workplaces. I went to the Pune University there, and there are 7 lakh students, and we have signed an MOU with them saying that we'll put each and every student today in this university under skill training. So we are going for ambitious programs. The outcome would take a while, but we are committed to see that this India has to move. We may be heard speaking a lot, but we are actually going in a direction where all of you have given us an opportunity to work, and I'm sure in course of time, we'll be able to achieve that. It may not be the right occasion to talk things on economics, but as I said, there was something to do with literacy, so I said I must at least tell you some of the vision statement which the Prime Minister has said. I'm pursuing that, and I'm sure I'll catch up with you, and in any time any one of you want to partner me in this effort, I'm not like a government. We equally hold hands with you to cross this channel, and any of you wanting to get in touch with me, you're welcome. And as I conclude, we also improvise better communication means. So if all of you or any one of you feel that you remember my name, which is Rajiv, Pratap, Rudy, well, please do not connect to my English to my state which I come from. I come from Bihar. So please, and I'm a hardcore politician from Bihar. And it would look still more hardcore if I say whom I contest and come. Well, it's not important whom. I must leave it to some of you to guess where I come from and whom I contest. But nonetheless, if anyone wants to partner me in this great crusade of skill development and entrepreneurship, I have not gone into the examples of entrepreneurship, it would have taken a while. We have improvised my name, and if you want to seek an appointment, is rprudy.appointment@gmail.com. And most of you have the knowledge. If you want to give a presentation, is rprudy.presentation@gmail.com. And if you want to just get in touch with my office, it is rprudy.office@gmail.com. You're welcome. All the Rotarians, all the best once again.